Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the moment of truth. I don't know about you, but I'm suffering from some serious white fatigue. Former officer and current prisoner Brett Hankinson, one of the murderers of Breonna Taylor, has been sentenced in federal court for his crime to a little under 3 years in prison and then an additional 3 years of probation. The criminal Hankinson isn't believed to be one of the thugs who fired the shot that actually killed Miss Taylor. He instead was firing at least 10 shots all over the place, including into the surrounding apartments, because the cops are so brave, don't you know? It's a miracle this moron didn't kill anyone else. The charge that he got was excessive force, and while the sentence is pitifully small considering what this creep did, the truth is the judge wasn't necessarily the big problem here. Biden's DOJ begrudgingly began the prosecution of Hankinson, but it's Trump's DOJ that's been handling the sentencing portion, and they decided to send a so-called memorandum calling for time served, which would have amounted to 1 day in prison and 3 years probation for this criminal. The judge presiding over the case rejected this memo, calling the Justice Department's recommendation incongruous and inappropriate. The judge also shot down Hankinson's own pathetic plea for a new trial, correctly noting that there were no grounds to do so. Obviously, this is the white right doing their typical performative extremism, because if they felt that this murderer didn't deserve prison time, then why waste everybody's time saying to put him in prison when they knew he would only get 1 day? Why even bother? Pam Bondi's DOJ claimed that the reason that they were advocating for a time-served sentence was that Hankinson didn't actually kill Breonna Taylor, nor did he kill or even wound anyone else. A ridiculous claim that would never be made for anyone, especially not a black person. Now, this memo that was sent at the last minute came from the Justice Department officials themselves, which means the bleach blonde bimbo Pam Bondi. The line prosecutors, that's the actual U.S. attorneys who prosecuted this case, they weren't the ones who sent the memo. This came from Pam Bondi and her clown car of creeps. Tamika Palmer, Breonna Taylor's mother, said that a new prosecutor, one who nobody had seen during the entire trial, came in at the last minute for sentencing and began openly arguing for the defendant instead of for the deceased, Breonna Taylor. Kind of reminds you what the Biden administration did in the trial of Ahmaud Arbery's murderers, saying that a plea deal was appropriate because, after all, they had already been sentenced and we need to go ahead and give the family peace by giving a sweetheart plea deal to the killers. Never mind the fact that the family of Ahmaud Arbery went to court and that they were the ones who openly argued that the criminals needed to go on trial and be convicted, this over the objections of Biden's DOJ. Now, was this asinine agitprop a serious proposal from Pam Bondi? Was this actually something that Trump himself wanted to see? If so, well, he is president, and this was a federal conviction, so he has the ability to go ahead and issue a pardon. He just might, by the way. The white right has so few victories and so many defeats, they need something they can point to and say, see, I'm white and I still say so, that kind of nonsense. We can be disgusted with what happened here, but recognize this is a continuity of policy. Just like with Biden when he sent his Solicitor General to interject herself into a case before the Supreme Court that the feds had nothing to do with. But they chose to get involved because they wanted to weaken Miranda protections, which is what they did. And in that case, the victim of police violence was also black. Yes, the Trump administration is more obnoxious and vulgar with their pro-cop advocacy, but Biden's administration was the one that had the chance to charge these murderers with murder. Instead, they decided to reduce the charges to merely crafting a falsified warrant and excessive force. And by the way, that case about crafting a falsified warrant, it still hasn't gone to trial. They wanted to reduce all of that criminality to nothing more than bad paperwork. Biden's DOJ refused to bring federal charges against the other killers because they were trying to walk back the prosecutions that public pressure had been forcing them to make. But regardless of Biden's own wrongdoing, that's still no excuse for the predictable nonsense that's coming from the orange man. But for those of you in the black grassroots, just understand something. Consider this to be a reminder. We have no friends. While Trump and his degenerate pals are cracking down on illegal aliens rightly, they still consider us to be the enemy as well. It's not as if they've taken us off their enemies list. Remember, being anti-black is a bipartisan issue. Both political parties subscribe to it. And if I had to answer right now, I would say that I would bet that Trump would actually attempt to try to give some sort of pardon to Hankinson. And the main reason why is, Hankinson he would point to and say, well, he didn't kill anybody, unlike, say, Derek Chauvin. But also, while Trump's allegiance to the thugs in blue is genuine, it's also true that his bungling of the Epstein files has created a schism in MAGA land. He would like to have a distraction because that's his go-to maneuver whenever he's trying to pass legislation and wants to get everybody to look the other way. So, actually using this as a means to get attention off of his own screw-up with Epstein would be exactly the kind of play you would expect the Orange Man to make. He doesn't exactly have crossover appeal with voters. As far as he's concerned, his play is always to try to gin up the base. Do whatever you gotta do to rile up the base. That's his only play, so that's what he does all the time. We know the GOP, being the official mouthpieces for the white establishment, are openly on the side of the thugs in blue, but let's be clear. The Democrats weren't exactly given this one the old college try. Miss Taylor was murdered during the first Trump administration, who of course did nothing about it. Now when Biden took office a year later, there was no urgency or even interest on his part. His administration had 4 years to round up those criminals and lock them up, but it was clear that Biden saw the Breonna Taylor murder as just some activists who needed to be placated or talked to death. They wanted the outcry to simply go away, only it wouldn't. Eventually, Merrick Garland was forced to have to do something, but he dragged his feet from the very beginning, overlooking or even excusing the blatant criminality that had taken place. The corrupt Klansmen in Kentucky broke a ton of laws before and after the murder of Breonna Taylor. I've detailed that for you on this channel. The Louisville police lied, flat out lied, to get that no-knock warrant. They falsely claimed that the post office had told them that suspicious packages were being sent to Breonna's apartment when they knew that the post office had told them the opposite. And truth be told, the post office didn't actually say it to the Louisville police because the local post office had an order that they were not to do anything for the Louisville police. God only knows what the cops had done to get on the mailman's bad side, and the judge who signed off on that fraudulent warrant, she didn't hold the cops in contempt for perjury when she found out that they had lied on the affidavit. But then again, that judge never saw a police warrant that she wouldn't sign off on. The cops couldn't get their lies straight about which one of them made out the fraudulent affidavit that they used to get the no-knock warrant. They couldn't get their lies straight about whether they knocked or didn't. They claimed that they did knock, which begs the question, why did they apply for a no-knock warrant then? They also lied and claimed that there were drugs and guns that they were going to find, but of course they didn't find anything. The police lied about who fired and when. They just couldn't get their story straight. While the murder of Breonna Taylor was high profile, it was hardly a complicated case. But for the Biden administration, it was a political dilemma. He was trying to undo the progress that had been made on punishing the police since 2020. All that taking a knee crap that the Democrats were doing for the cameras, that was just pathetic PR, and it didn't fool anyone. Biden made it clear whose side he was on. The criminals. Every crooked cop, every lying deputy, every dirty DA, every scumbag judge. There need to be RICO cases put on all of them. Now, for the Democrat shills who infest my comments section, who will point to what the Trump DOJ just tried to pull and say, see, this is the reason why y'all need to go on the warpath against the Orange Man. First of all, we're not supporting him, stupid. Second, are the Democrats going to go after the police? The entire reason black voters stayed home was because you have cities under Democrat mayors, you have Democrat DAs who refuse to even prosecute these degenerates. That's what happened with Breonna Taylor. They allowed the white right to push laws and policies meant to embolden the thugs in blue, and instead of pushing back and putting the law and policies in place to punish the police, instead Biden bragged about diverting COVID funds to the cops. Democrats bragged about backing the badge instead of breaking the badge. Where are the laws to clarify that citizens can and should protect themselves from police brutality and that the law will be on their side? You see, Kenneth Walker did the right thing, and if more citizens protected themselves from these police ambushes, a lot less innocent people would be dead. But you don't see the Democrats saying, wait, we got to be on the side of the citizens here. We know these cops are dirty. Somebody's got to rein them in, and the citizens cannot hesitate when they're being fired upon or being threatened. Democrats could have and should have been pushing rafts of legislation to go after the police and make it a point to put forward prosecutors who will go after them. But they didn't do any of that. 4 years that they had the Breonna Taylor murder case on their desk, and the best that they could come up with was excessive force and fraudulent paperwork. Because corrupt politicians rely on corrupt cops to protect them at all levels. That's the purpose that the police play in a dirty system like this. Let's get something straight. The only reason that a case was even brought at all was because the grassroots demanded it and didn't stop demanding it and made it something that couldn't be buried. The grassroots put up billboards, and then the queen of the white media bootlicks, Oprah, tried to jump on that bandwagon. She tried to dispel the energy, but it didn't work. She wanted to get out in front of it and say, I'm going to be the leader of this particular parade, but nobody was following her. I remember making it a point to get on the case of two of the writers for the Washington Post who had been misreporting on that murder and were omitting the information about the fraudulent affidavits for the no-knock warrants. I started going after them on Twitter on my own. I made it a point not to bring the family into that because I didn't want for them to be able to lie and claim that there was some sort of organized harassment campaign against them or anything else. What I did was I went into the threads on their Twitter feeds and started posting links to official newspapers in Louisville and Kentucky, in other words, so-called credible news sources that had reported on the fraudulent affidavits, and asked them, when are you guys going to report on it? This in turn forced these Washington Post writers to have to do follow-up pieces that finally mention the fraudulent affidavits in their reporting. And the Washington Post matters because it's the inside the Beltway paper of record, and people in political circles are at least aware of its coverage. And it was pretty much after that that other white media organs began to finally talk about those fraudulent affidavits. Now, again, I have no direct evidence of this, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the main thing the Biden DOJ chose to focus on was precisely the fraudulent paperwork from the police that led to Breonna's murder. That was the first domino to fall. If the Democrats are supposed to be different than the Republicans on policy, then they have to actually be different. If we have to drag them kicking and screaming to do the things that as their constituency, their so-called base, that they are supposed to be doing for us anyway, then that doesn't mean that they're actual opposition. That means they are controlled opposition. They are different in rhetoric only. Hell, even Republican administrations can be pressured into bringing prosecutions against the police occasionally if there is sufficient and sustained public pressure to do so. So please don't try to make Biden into some sort of saint just because after the uprisings of 2020, he felt enough heat where he felt like he had to try to do something to placate the outraged masses. The only reason that any of these scumbags are being held to account is because of the activists who were in the street, not because of any alleged decency by the Democrats. The grassroots made that happen. The same way the grassroots made the prosecution of Ahmaud Arbery's murderers happen. The politicians weren't responsible for that. As Dr. Claude Anderson said, politicians react to the conditions under them. What we do is more important than what they do, because persistence on our part shapes the landscape that the politicians have to operate in. We're fighting a war against white supremacy, and in war you can't spend too much time basking in your victories or lamenting your setbacks. You gotta keep moving forward regardless. We keep the heat on the bastards. We remain adamant that our demands aren't going to change, and that we punish those who refuse to submit to our demands. If we do what we're supposed to do, then before it's all over, we will create a social and legal environment of justice, so that these cowardly scumbags know that no matter who's in office, they'll no longer be able to count on getting away with murder. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Glenda Tice, Samora Morris, Sakina Collins, Christopher Pittman, and Nathan Gunter. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.